And I think that's so important because we have to recognize that we may not see ourselves as being qualified to decorate somebody else's canvas, but we never know what we do or what we say, how it can impact somebody's life. Again, I go back to 1975, when my professor said, yes, as a lyricist, you have potential. I want you to keep working on this. That one conversation resonates in my life now 48 years later. Again, it might have been something in somebody's life that maybe, say, as a third grader, their teacher may have told them something, and they're 50 years old and they're still drawing from that because of what that teacher said to them. And so again, I'm a very big advocate of the fact that our actions and our words, at times we may consider them to be just throwaway, but we never know how it's going to impact somebody else as far as what they see and how they receive it. My background is in higher education at the college level. I worked as an academic advisor for Teachers College. And so probably about 4 months ago, Mr. Campbell, I got a message on Messenger from a former student. This is a student from probably about 20 years ago, somewhere in there. And she just reached out to me because she saw me from the authorship side on Facebook. And she said, hey, I just wanted to thank you because I know you don't remember me, but I remember we met that one time. It's been years and years and years ago. And she said she was feeling down. She wasn't really encouraged. She was dealing with some stuff. And she said that one time that I met with her, she said I was very encouraging. I was honest with her, and I challenged her to get past it and to be the best she could be, something like that. And Mr. Campbell, that's been 20 years ago. Now, I honestly don't remember the conversation, no disrespect to her, but she said it lit a fire under her, and it's continued to really help and shape where she's at today. But when she sent me that, it really hit home because it reminded me of the fact that what we say and what we do, we may not think it has an impact, but again, we don't know how it's going to impact somebody's canvas. And we may not realize that we were that person as that iron that sharpened them to prepare them to go forward. So we have to be very, very aware of what we're saying and what we're doing on the positive side. And then on the negative side as well, things can come out in a negative manner. And we don't know how it's going to impact somebody. You could tell somebody, well, they're not going to do this, and they can't do this, and they can't do that. Well, and I've come to realize in the last few years, what if that person internalizes that? What have you done to them? And even more frightening is, what are they then having internalized that? What do they teach their kid, the next generation? We don't know where it's going to go, and you don't want it to go in that direction.
Okay, everyone, welcome back to Living the Next Chapter. I have a great guest with me on today, fellow music lover, an author as well. And we're going to be talking about his author journey and his books as well. Alan is joining me today. And Alan, welcome to the podcast. Nice to have you here.
Thank you very much, Mr. Campbell. Thank you. It's an honor to be with you here this afternoon. Really looking forward to us spending some time just chatting and everything and just kind of having a nice, casual conversation.
I love it. I love it. Okay, so I'd like to start here with everyone listening. Where are you in this great big world of ours?
I am in the United States. I'm in Omaha, Nebraska. Nebraska is essentially right smack dab in the middle of the country. It is the heart of what I would call the Midwest, the Midlands, if that's what they call it here in the States.
Nice. And is this where you've lived most of your life then?
I've lived here most of my life. I've lived in 4 or 5 different places before I eventually came back here. I spent some time down south, out in the Colorado area, before I eventually came back to Nebraska, which is home. So,
okay, so tell me, for those who have never been to Nebraska, what is it that keeps you there?
You know, as much as anything, I think it comes down to where you grew up, the family, the relationships that you build over the course of you growing up. And I'm very fortunate, I'm very blessed, Mr. Campbell, as far as, say, relationships, because most of the people that I have grown up with, I still have some type of relationship with quite a few of them. Some of them are essentially family from the time I was basically maybe 5 or 6 years old. So there's a great sense of community, a great sense of connection with a lot of the people that I've known here for years. And it sounds corny, but there's the old saying that home is where the heart is. And that's really what it is all about. What are the connections that you have, the relationships that you have, the memories, the legacy that you're building? So for me, that's really what's important, because I could have gone somewhere else. But at this point in life, I'm good where I'm at. So the grass is not always greener on the other side. I think all of us get to a point in life where we figure that out. You think, well, if I'm over here, that's better. And then you realize later on, no, that's not necessarily the truth. And so, like anybody else, I was younger, I figured that would be the way it would be, where the grass would be better over there. But eventually, I think as you grow and you mature, you realize, okay, where is I'm going to really be happy? Where is it that I'm going to feel like it's home?
Right.
If I can put it that way. So,
yeah. So I remember hearing somebody say in regards to that saying about the grass being greener on the other side of the fence, that is actually an indication that maybe you need to take better care of your lawn.
Thank you.
Right?
Exactly.
So if you're always looking at what everybody else has, maybe it's time to look at yourself and go, okay, how can I make my thing better where I am, instead of dreaming about what somebody else has? So
exactly. That
I love that
in that fashion as well. And that is really true, because over there is not going to be any better than what you currently have. What are you making with what you have? That really is what it comes down to, as far as I'm concerned.
And that your neighbor's probably thinking the same thing of you. Oh, I wish I had their life. I wish I had what they have. Right? It goes both ways. So enjoy the place you're in and love it and make it the best place ever just by you being there. I love that.
Absolutely. 100%. I could not agree more.
Amazing. Okay, so beyond writing books, which we're going to talk about here on the podcast, what I find unique and creative about you, and we're going to have you back on another podcast that I host, is your musical background. And I love the idea that you write songs and you've written songs for years. Tell me a little bit about your musical background in that sense. And again, we'll have you back to go in more depth about that. But I think it's a big part of who you are. Tell me a little bit about your journey writing songs.
I think what has happened here over the last maybe year or so, Mr. Campbell, I've been in a position where I've really now had the time to really see the connection between the writing lyrically, as far as music is concerned, and how that has built the bridge for me to become an author. And I guess I didn't realize till maybe about 2 months ago, I was talking with a mentor on the music side, and we were talking about a song that I'm trying to get signed to a publisher, and explained to her that the music lyrically is what I do. I write the lyrics for the music. I don't do the music, but I do the lyrics. But she said it's not that unusual for a lot of people who do write music to also become authors as well, or they continue to be authors. And I didn't really realize that until she mentioned it. And then as I started doing a little more research, I began to realize that writing is particularly interesting, because it does not mean that you write in one particular format all the time. That because of that creative energy that probably exists within each of us, it has that capacity to then kind of expand or kind of evolve in different ways that truthfully you did not think existed within you. As far as lyrics for music, I've been doing that since 75 or so. So that goes back 47 years, 48 years, something like that, somewhere in there. So I can't believe it's been 48 years. I'm not sure what happened, Mr. Campbell.
What happened? Yeah.
What happened? I don't remember. But anyway, So that's really where the journey began. And I'm looking back and I continue to look back and I think about the fact that when I wrote my first set of lyrics for a potential song, I'll never forget, I went to one of my college professors who was sort of like my mentor and who had a music background as well. And I said, hey, this is what I really have a passion for doing. I let him read what I had written. And so I was scared to death because I'm thinking, I'm like 20 years old at the time. I'm thinking, well, if he says it's just worthless, then what am I doing? I'm just wasting my time.
Right.
But, I'll never forget the fact that he read it. And he said, Mr. Campbell, he says, you've got some potential here. You need to just keep working on this and keep developing what it is that you're trying to do and to listen and to learn more. And then he gave me a music contact that he had back on the East Coast. And I really continued to hold on to that conversation simply for the fact that his platform in my life was such that had he told me don't bother, who knows where that would have led me at this point in my life. But because he gave me a word of encouragement, that's really where it all began as far as, say, that writing, which I started out doing in terms of like Christian and gospel music, and definitely evolved into other genres of music as far as me doing the lyrics and then working with a musician to create a song. And so that just kept going and going and going. And then again, what happens with each of us is that if we have one talent set, which we think is in one stream of, say, consciousness, it does not mean that's where it's going to stay for all time, because it eventually starts to branch out. It eventually, as I said before, starts to kind of manifest itself in different areas that you did not anticipate. So that really became the case for me starting in 2015, when I then began to kind of progress into the realm of becoming an author and a writer, not necessarily musically, but just in terms of the authorship side. So that really got started in 2015. And I have to say, in all honesty, Mr. Campbell, it was really a shock, because when I started doing it, I really didn't have an idea what I was doing. It's almost like I had this stuff inside me and I had to get it out. And so I just put into paper, in essence, but in this case, I just sat down at the keyboard at my desktop and just started writing down my collected thoughts, collected memories, and then kind of translated them into life experiences and what it has been like for me growing up, going through different things, and how it has impacted or even molded or shaped my relationship with God, because I'm a Christian author. And so now I'm beginning to look back and kind of starting to see how all of the pieces of the puzzle are really fitting together. And so starting in 2015, that's where that new part of my journey really began in terms of writing and becoming an author. But even in doing that, I can clearly remember I was writing things and getting things out of me. And then I got to a point where I had a collection of material, Mr. Campbell, and I legitimately was sitting there and I was thinking, what am I supposed to do with this? Because I had no idea. And so I'll never forget, I talked to a friend of mine and she read some of the things I had written up to that point. And this was probably getting into middle of 2016. And she said, well, why don't you write for a blog, like a Christian blog? And Mr. Campbell, I'm so green and so naive at this time, I didn't even know what a blog was. So I asked her, I said, well, what's that? And so she explained it to me. She says, well, why don't you submit some of these things to a blog and let's see what will happen. I said, okay. So I came home, I used Google, and I just kind of Googled Christian blogs, and several came up. I wound up submitting some material to probably about 12 or 13 different Christian blogs. They all said no, which I wasn't really surprised by, because I wasn't expecting anything. But I'll never forget the last one I sent something to was a blog called Christian Blessings. And this was in late, probably the middle of 2016, about November or so. So I sent her one of my writings, one of my short inspirational essays. And this is in Singapore. The editor emailed me back about a day later, and she says, "Oh, I like this. Would you like to write for me?" And I was stunned because I was thinking, what do you mean write for you? What does that mean? And she said, Mr. Campbell, she said, "I want you to write for me every week." I was like, okay, wait, well, hold on, hold on. I said, first of all, I don't even know what I'm doing. And I said, secondly, I don't know how any of this works. Because see, I'm so new to this. This is a whole new realm of opportunity for me. So I said, what about like once a month? And she said, okay. So she gave me an assignment to start writing for her in January of 2016. I'll never forget it, Mr. Campbell. And she said that with January 2016, of course, begins the new year. And she said, I want you to write something that kind of launches the beginning of a new year. And she said it had to be at least 300 words. I said, okay. And after I sent her my approval, I can remember sitting there and I was thinking to myself, I have no idea what I'm doing. I found myself thinking, what have I gotten myself into?
Right.
I didn't know what I was going to write about. And the thought of 300 words, in all honesty, Mr. Campbell, it might as well have been 30,000 words because I didn't know what I was going to do. But I'll never forget, I kept racking my brains. And then I realized that, okay, the deadline to submit the article was like December 30th of 2015. So around about December 27th, I was driving home after Christmas here in the States. And I heard a song on the radio. We've all heard it, I'm sure. It's Old Lang Syne.
Yeah.
Now it comes back to the music side, my lyrical side, because one part of the lyrics talk about, will old acquaintances be forgotten? And it clicked. And I said, that's it. So I think back now, it's amazing because here it is tying in my lyrical base with my authorship side, because the first article that I sent to her for January 2016 was entitled Old Acquaintances. And the gist of what I was writing about was, as we go into the beginning of each new year, what are some of the old acquaintances that we want to rid ourselves of? In my case, it was going to be fear. It was going to be the anxiety of trying to figure out what I'm going to do. Are old acquaintances something like, say, habits that you need to get rid of?
Yeah.
So that's kind of what I based my initial article on as far as Christian Blessing of Singapore is concerned. And she really liked it. She said, keep up the good work. And she said, you'll be surprised one day that 300 words won't be anything for you. You'll just do that in a blink of an eye. I thought there's no way I ever get to that level. But I actually wound up writing for them for about 5 years until the end of 2020, I do believe. But even as I was writing for Christian Blessing in Singapore during this time, I continued to compile enough material where I got to the point in early 2017 where I said, well, maybe I could write a book and just put all this in the book. Now, again, and let me also interject here that your opportunity or your calling has nothing to do with your age. And I'm saying this because all of this for me, Mr. Campbell, began at the age of 60. So I am like 60 years old at the time. I have no idea what I'm being called to do by God as far as becoming now a Christian author. I just kept moving forward and I said, okay, I don't know where I'm going, but I'm going to trust you, God, and see what's going to happen. So I remember in 2017, around about February, I'll never forget, I had enough material together. And by this time, because of my music side, I had already joined a web community called Fiverr. And I had gone into Fiverr and I put out a request. I said, well, I have this material. I'd like to get it published in like a book. Can somebody edit the book? Can they format it and like get it on Amazon? And I'll never forget, I sent it out on a Friday night in February of 2017. And I'm thinking in my mind, okay, maybe in about 8 or 9 months, somebody will respond and I could get the book out maybe a year or so later. And to my absolute shock, I came back home the next day after running errands. And Mr. Campbell, I had like 32 people who said they wanted to work with me. Now that was scary because I was thinking, how am I going to pick one person out of 32? And so I then spent about 2 weeks just going through everybody, reading their qualifications and getting a sense of who I thought would work well. And as it turned out, I wound up working with a lady in South Africa. And I sent her my manuscript and everything. And Mr. Campbell, she did a great job editing everything, formatting it, and getting it uploaded to Amazon. And so the first Friday night in May of 2017, my first book appeared called Here I Am, Lord. And I'll never forget, I was sitting here at my desktop like I am now. And Here I Am, Lord was there the first Friday in May of 2017. And I just sat there for about 10 minutes when I saw the book and I just stared at it. And I stared at it, Mr. Campbell, because I could not believe this had happened. I kept thinking, how did this happen? Right. Particularly for somebody who was just stumbling in the dark, had no idea what I was doing. And to see a finished product on Amazon, it was mind-blowing. It really was. It was almost surreal in the respect that I kept thinking, hey, that's me. I mean, that's
me.
That's
I'm on the screen. I'm right there.
That's my picture. My book. And so I was just really amazed. And then I was so naive to this that I remember when I was telling my friends I released my first book. All my friends were really excited and everything. And they were saying, well, okay, Alan, when you do your book signing, I want to come to the book signing and have you sign my book and get a picture. So I said, okay. And after I got through talking to a couple of people, I kept thinking, what's a book signing? I didn't know what that meant. Yeah. I didn't know what you do. And I kept thinking in my mind, why do they want me to sign their book? I don't understand. I'm just me. I mean, they know who I am. I don't get the big deal. But my sister actually forced me into doing a book signing because she said, you have to do a book signing because people want to get your autograph. They want you to personally sign the book. I said, okay, I'll go ahead and do it. And I had quite a few people turn out for that. I was shocked. And they were excited. And they would treat me like I was this big time star. And I'm like, I'm just me.
There you go.
Why are we doing this? But when I look back, I realized that was really just another part of my writing journey. And I was thinking, okay, after my first book, Here I Am, Lord, in 2017, I said, well, okay, God, I think it's time for me to go on and go back to do my music. And God very directly let me know, no, we're not done yet. We've got more stuff to do. And so I continued to write even more. And then in the summer of 2019, I released my second book, which is called In the Spirit Intended. And that book in July of 2019 actually wound up earning me recognition as a best-selling author on Amazon, which I'm very proud of.
Wow.
And so that went well. And then this past 6 months or so, I released my third book. My third book is just basically an ebook because I decided just to do an ebook because that's really the market that's really growing. And the third book is called Just a Closer Walk. So I've done a total of 3 books up to this point here in 2023.
Nice.
Now, if listeners were to ask me, well, what's the content like? I would say to them that my writing style, Mr. Campbell, is very, very down to earth. It's very relatable, and it's easy to read. When I write my chapters in my book, I think each chapter might be 2 or 3 pages. That's about it. Just as an example, from my first book, Here I Am, Lord, one of the chapters is called Can You Hear Me Now? And I use that thematically as a play off of might have been AT&T commercial here in the States or across the North American continent about Can You Hear Me Now?
Right, yeah.
And so the point that I was making, Mr. Campbell, was the fact that each of us have a calling or purpose that we are assigned to fulfill.
Right.
But are we hearing the signals? Are we hearing what's being whispered to us or being shouted at us? Do we hear and do we receive it, and then do we act upon it? And so a lot of times, even with what God's doing for each of us, our question is, can we hear what he's saying?
Right.
I'm sure he's saying, can you hear me now? And so in my case, it was a situation of to get to the point of becoming a Christian author. I finally said, yes, I can hear you.
Yeah.
Not that it was something that I was looking to hear, but at the same time, there came a point where I had to stop and actually listen. Yeah. So I use those kind of stories and parables as such to kind of relate to everyday people. Because as far as my Christian walk is concerned, I think as much as anything for me, and I can only speak for myself, who you are on your day of worship is one thing. But I've come to realize and understand that that's not really what it's all about. It's about who are you the other 6 days of the week.
Right.
Because it's what I call the morning after. The morning after, what I mean by that, Mr. Campbell, is who are you going to be the morning after that day of worship for the next 6 to 7 days? What's the pattern of behavior people are seeing in you? What are the standards that you're living by? People are looking and they want to see, okay, are you saying one thing and are you doing something different? So our actions are what are going to speak volumes more than the words that we send forth. So that's kind of been my writing style, as far as I make it plain, I make it very relatable. I've been complimented because the content in each of the 3 books, people have always said it's not preachy.
Good. Yeah.
It's not denominational.
Mm-hmm.
It's not historical. And someone said it's not so highfalutin that I can't relate to it. Right. They said it's just everyday conversation that makes you stop and think and say, you know what? That makes sense. Or I hadn't really thought about it that way. And so I'm proud to say that's really how I try to write everyday, ordinary, relatable things that I think people will read. They'll see themselves in the stories. And then my hope is that they'll sit back and say, you know, I remember that time back when this happened or that happened, and now I get it. Now I understand what it was all about. Because I'm convinced that a lot of times the past experiences that we have aren't just about when they happened then. They come full circle later on in life where you look back and you say, okay, I get it. I know how it ties into where I'm at today. And it helps me have a better understanding of what I'm dealing with today, if that makes sense.
I get the sense talking to you, Alan, that you treasure learning and growing. You talked about not knowing what a blog was, and and you went and found out and you went after it. So what are you learning now, today, even this week, that's inspiring you to continue writing and to continue sharing your message?
What I'm learning is that everyday people are more alike than we are different. It sounds like a cliche, but it's the truth of the matter. Because each of us are going through different things on a daily basis. And we have similar experiences. We have similar challenges that make us more connected than what we actually believe. And so what I find a lot of times is, and it sounds corny in a way, do you take the time just to reach out to somebody and say, hey, just checking on you, seeing how you're doing or something like that? It seems corny, it seems cliche or whatever. But I think, Mr. Campbell, what we're starting to realize, particularly after this last 3 years of COVID or so, we all have gone through some things that we never anticipated going through. And we can no longer make the assumption that everybody's doing okay, there's no problem. That's not the case.
Yeah.
I read a story on Facebook, maybe about a week ago, about a gentleman who had reached a point of just being totally backed in the corner with nowhere to go. And so he just reached out to a friend of his. He called his friend, and his friend said, hey, what's going on? And he just broke down, told his friend, this is what I'm dealing with, and man, I got to get some help. And his friend instantly jumped in and helped him, and he said that changed his life dramatically. But what if he hadn't reached out or whatever? What if he had just tried to keep it to himself and not say, hey, I need somebody to help me out here, whatever the case may be? And otherwise, where would he be today? I'm saying all that to say this, when I'm beginning to realize that, again, we have more similarities than what we think. We're all going through different things. But if nothing else, did the 3-year period of COVID teach us that we can't take anything for granted? Here in the States, when we went into quarantine, for a long time, you just thought, oh, it's just natural to go to a sporting event with no concerns. It's natural to go to concert or even a grocery store or to your place of worship. But when those things were taken away for a 2 or 3 year period, did it really give you a better appreciation, a deeper appreciation of things that maybe we took for granted, or dare I say, did we even feel entitled to? When you start losing those things, you start saying, oh, wait a minute, that really is more special than what I gave it consideration for. Recently, I went to my bank, and Mr. Campbell, it was really strange because I went into the bank. I didn't have to wear a mask. And it felt strange to not have a mask on, but it reminded me of the fact that, wow, little things like that we just thought was no big deal, you begin to realize, hey, just going to the grocery store now again, or going to concerts or things like that, I hope it gives you a better appreciation for some of the things that perhaps we took for granted. I hope as well as giving us appreciation of, you know what, maybe those things that you thought were really important, really weren't that important.
Yeah.
Maybe the material things that you thought you just had to have at all costs, maybe that's not what's really important anymore. Is it more important about the relationship you have with your family, with your kids, with your friends, or seeing people, or just calling them and talking to them and chatting with them, like I said, just to talk to them? Those become things that really become important to me. So I'll be 68, as a matter of fact, on Saturday. So I may be in a time of the season now where I really begin to say, you know what? So many things that I just thought was important, it wasn't really that important when I think about it. It's really been about the people and the blessings of just being able to get up and move around or do different things and see people and see friends and things like that and cherish those things. So that's kind of where I'm at right now, where I think the attitude and the level of awareness has changed. And maybe it comes with age. I hope it comes with age, because if not, I'm in trouble. But anyway, I think about those things now because of the fact that, hey, it is a cliche and we don't take it serious until it really hits us. But it is a cliche that tomorrow's not promised to anybody.
That's right.
And COVID has shown us that tomorrow is not promised. We don't know what's going to happen one day from the next. So hopefully it's given us a better sense of appreciation and the ability to know that a lot of stuff that we worried about before, Mr. Campbell, it really wasn't that important to begin with.
That's right. So, okay, so I have one of my listeners, which is quite unique. I actually work with her. Her name is Kathy, and she's listening to this episode in the future.
Mm-hmm.
So hi, Kathy, from us. Kathy is a listener, and from Kathy's perspective, she's not a part of any faith group, any faith belief historically. And when she hears the topic kind of go towards topics of faith and belief and things, immediately as a non-believer, she kind of puts up a little bit of a wall, going, okay, well, this really isn't for me because I'm not on that journey right now. But she loves listening to people who, from a faith perspective, can tie in what they write to a community that's not faith-based. So when you're writing your books, are you writing towards a faith community, which is fine, or are you also encompassing people outside of a faith belief where your books would add value to them as well, to somebody like Kathy who's listening to us?
I would say it's on both sides of the fence because, again, with my writing, yes, a lot of it is faith-based in terms of my relationship with God. But again, Mr. Campbell, I'm not preachy. I'm not advocating you have to do this, you have to do that. A lot of my writing, all of my writing is really about the experiences of life and things that I have learned, I have gone through, the people I've been in contact with. And for people, because I've had people who have read the book that do not necessarily have that faith component.
Yeah.
But they're saying, you know what? This is relatable because it made me think about some things from my past that, hey, maybe now I have a better understanding of what it meant then as opposed to where it stands now. And so again, for me, as much as anything, Mr. Campbell, and one of the things about the Christian experience is about, more than anything else, it's about the relationship. But it's about, for me, how are you living it out from day to day?
Yeah.
And are you relating to people on either side of the fence? And are you being consistent with who you are? So I'm not being judgmental because I'm nobody. I got more faults than anybody I know. Mm-hmm. But when I write, I just write basically almost kind of like down the middle and just say, hey, this is what's going on with me. I'll give you a great example. My newest book called Just a Closer Walk. The opening chapter in that book, Mr. Campbell, is called A Blank Canvas. And what I'm relating to there is that each of us, when we come into this world, we are a blank canvas, completely empty. But over the process of our journey, there are going to be people who come along who fill in that canvas in terms of our interactions with them, our experiences, our relationship with them, the good and the bad. And as the process of that canvas begins to become filled, at some point, hopefully you stop back and you say, you know what, that moment in time is a part of the canvas of who I am today.
Right.
This experience is a part of the canvas of who I am today. So, and I actually wrote that really based on one of my good friends who was an art teacher and who had the ability to take a blank sheet of paper and just start creating a picture out of nothing. And I could never figure out how he did it. But I realized that was his gift, that was his talent, but it got me to thinking, you know what? Just like this piece of paper, each of us are a blank canvas. What are we going to look like as we go through this journey called life? How is that canvas being filled by the things that we experience and we go through on a daily basis? And that's the opening chapter in my book, which I really, really like. Another chapter is called iron sharpening iron, which of course is from the scriptures. But where I'm going with that one, Mr. Campbell, is the fact that each of us are going to come in contact with somebody who is sharpening us in terms of our walk and who's making us a better person along the way. That is just a natural progression from the time you're born to the time that you leave this world. Are you in a position where you're ready to receive that? Do you understand that the sharpening process is for your benefit? And then as well, are we recognizing the fact that even as we are right now, we're going to serve as someone who's going to sharpen somebody else as they begin their journey along the road. So that was part of why I wrote that particular chapter as well. So again, for me, it's very down to earth. It's very relatable. And yes, it is a heavily oriented Christian type of writing. But even for somebody who does not have that religious background as such, I would say to them, take that out of there if you choose, if that's what you want to do. Think about what's your blank canvas been like? Mm-hmm. Who has been that iron has helped to sharpen you as you've been going along this road? The closing chapter in my third book is Journey Unexpected. And I close out the third book just to close the walk with that chapter, because to get to this point now where I turned 68 on Saturday, April 29th, this was a journey unexpected that I never anticipated going on. I think a lot of times we all have a preconceived notion of what road we're going to travel on in life, which is okay. Yeah. A lot of times life does not happen that way. You wind up going in a whole different direction that you look back and you're like, how did I get here? I'm a witness to that. So I close out the third book by talking about the fact that this journey was completely unexpected. I appreciate how I got to this point, but nonetheless, I hope I have enough wisdom to acknowledge the fact that it has been a journey unexpected, because it was not something I had planned. It was not something that I necessarily dreamed of doing, but here I am 7-8 years later, starting in 2015 to be at this point. But this is a part of that journey unexpected, and this also continues to be part of the canvas that's being filled for Alan as I keep going forward every day.
I love it. You're giving me so many visual things as you're talking. And I'm thinking of the listener as we chat, Alan, because they can picture the canvas up on an easel. It's blank. There's nothing there. The one thing too, like it's one thing about who's gonna decorate your canvas.
Thank you.
The other side of it is, whose canvas are you decorating?
Thank you.
Right? Like it's your responsibility to decorate someone else's canvas as well, not just be receiving all the time.
And I think that's so important, because we have to recognize that we may not see ourselves as being qualified,
right,
to decorate somebody else's canvas. But we never know what we do or what we say, how it can impact somebody's life.
Right.
Again, I go back to 1975, when my professor said, yes, as a lyricist, you have potential. I want you to keep working on this. That one conversation resonates in my life now, 48 years later. Again, it might have been something in somebody's life that maybe, say, as a third grader, their teacher may have told them something, and they're 50 years old and they're still drawing from that because of what that teacher said to them. And so again, I'm a very big advocate of the fact that our actions and our words,
right,
at times we may consider them to be just throwaway, but we never know how it's going to impact somebody else as far as what they see and how they receive it. My background is in higher education at the college level. I worked as a academic advisor for Teachers College. And so probably about 4 months ago, Mr. Campbell, I got a message on Messenger from a former student. This is a student from probably about 20 years ago, somewhere in there. And she just reached out to me because she saw me from the authorship side on Facebook. And she says, hey, I just wanted to thank you because I know you don't remember me, but I remember we met that one time. It's been years and years and years ago. And she said she was feeling down. She wasn't really encouraged. She was dealing with some stuff. And she said that one time that I met with her, she said I was very encouraging. I was honest with her, and I challenged her to get past it and to be the best she could be, something like that. And Mr. Campbell, that's been 20 years ago. Now, I honestly don't remember the conversation, no disrespect to her, but she said it lit a fire under her.
Right.
And it's continued to really help and shape where she's at today. But when she sent me that, it really hit home because it reminded me of the fact that what we say and what we do, we may not think it has an impact. But again, we don't know how it's going to impact somebody's canvas. And we may not realize that we were that person as that iron that sharpened them to prepare them to go forward. So we have to be very, very aware of what we're saying and what we're doing on the positive side. And then on the negative side as well, things can come out in a negative manner. And we don't know how it's going to impact somebody. Right. You could tell somebody, well, they're not going to do this and they can't do this and they can't do that. Well, and I've come to realize in the last few years, what if that person internalizes that? What have you done to them? Yeah. And even more frightening is, what are they then having internalized that? What do they teach their kid, the next generation? Right. We don't know where it's going to go, and you don't want to go in that direction.
Yeah. I love the conversation. This is great. And like I said, we're going to have you back on the Add to My Playlist podcast to talk about your music and all of that. That's another whole side I can't wait to explore. I really look forward to that conversation as well. As for the listeners that are following along with the conversation and they want to reach out to you, Alan, they want to interact with you, continue the conversation, or talk to you about your books, what's the best way for people to connect with you?
They can reach me at my website, which is alantblack.com. And I'm also on Instagram, AlanTBlack55 as well. And so they can reach me there. Mr. Campbell, the other thing that has come out of this, which I did not anticipate again, was I've had people that have reached out to me and said, well, I want to write a book. Can you help me? Can you give me some points and everything? And I'm thinking, they asking me? I mean, I'm the guy that 7 years ago, I didn't even know what I was doing.
Right.
But I have this attitude and this approach now that if they're asking me that, I always tell them I will do what I can to help them, to kind of get started and to encourage them. Because if nothing else, I look at the fact that I didn't get to this point by myself. There were people along the way who encouraged me and kept pushing me. And so I look at it as my obligation as such to try to give back, to try to pay it forward for other people. If I could just give them one or two ideas to kind of look at, to kind of go forward with, not just say their authorship side, but maybe I could be an example that, well, hey, if he did it and he didn't know what he was doing, so I at least have a chance. And I don't mind being perceived in that way because realistically, like I said before, when I started this in 2015, I had no idea what I was doing. I had no intention of going down this road. And here I am now, 7, 8 years later. And this is where I'm at. Who would think? I didn't even know what interviews were, such as the one we're doing today. Someone told me about this 2 years ago. I'm like, what's a podcast?
What's a podcast? Google, like, what's a podcast?
What does that mean? I'm thinking podcast, like Star Wars or Star Trek. And again, I'm learning, but what I've come to realize is that every day you're in a position to learn something new, particularly with technology the way it is now, because there's so much out here that you're learning and you can grow with. And you have to be in a position where you're not going to let fear get in the way, because I'm not going to sit there and pretend. To do things like this, it's a challenge. To have the conversation, I think, is natural for me. But the technology part of it, things like the Facebook and the website and the Instagram, you got to remember, I was 60 years old when I started this. This was, I come from an era, just to relate to the listeners. I come from the era where in college, if I did a term paper, it was on this old-fashioned thing called a typewriter.
Typewriter. Not connected to the internet. No, nothing.
No,
yes, typewriter.
And Google was, in my day growing up, encyclopedias.
Yes, books. Like
books.
On a shelf. Yeah.
Yes.
Heavy
and
books.
So it's an amazing transition to where we are today. I marvel at it because of my age. I think, okay, I can put a word in there or a topic, and within 2 or 3 seconds, I can get information. I'm thinking, man. I used to spend hours in the library in the undergrad school trying to get this information, and now it's like,
ding,
seconds.
I know.
It's amazing.
It is.
It really is. So it's a growing process, and it is a process that each of us have the opportunity to really go through. But that old acquaintance that you have to get rid of, if it's fear of the unknown, you have to be willing to confront it and say, you know what, I'm just going to walk through this, because that was my biggest thing. My old acquaintance was the fear, not knowing what I was getting myself into. But at some point, I just said, I'm just going to jump in the water and let's just see what happens. Now, I haven't sank totally yet. And I'm like, I think I'll be okay. But every day I'm still learning.
Right.
And that's what's important for me, is to continue to learn and to continue to grow, and then to hopefully be in a position, Mr. Campbell, where I can give back part of what I know to somebody else, and hopefully I see them do better than I am.
Yeah.
Because I'm like, if I got to a certain point, I want you to go even higher. That's really what my dream is.
And I think to some degree, you're doing part of that today, just being part of the podcast. You're encouraging listeners around the world who are hearing your voice, hearing your story, and now encouraging them to take a step forward. And so that feedback that you had young in your earlier days that set you on the path that you're on, you've done the same now for the listeners listening to our conversation. So I appreciate it.
And I hope that's the case. If it is, then I'm honored to be able to do so. And again, I'm at a point now where I think what becomes important is, what is the legacy that you're going to leave here when you finally do leave this planet? Not being morbid, but we're all going to go that direction eventually. But did you leave something for somebody else to make their journey a little bit better?
Right.
I think that's a responsibility that each of us have. And what you're leaving is not to be measured in terms of the quantity as much as it is the quality of what it is that you're leaving behind.
Right. Love it. So what I'm taking away from our conversation is, in one hand, I need to pick up my canvas, take it with me. In my other hands, I need to take my paints and my brush, go out into the world and let people paint on my canvas, and then also add to others' canvases at the same time.
Absolutely. In the end, that's what's going to stand.
I love it. Thank you so much.
All the stuff in the world will pass away. It's not going to matter, because you can't take it.
It's amazing. Alan, thank you for painting on our canvas today. I really appreciate having you on the podcast.
It was my honor, Mr. Campbell, and thank you again. And like I said, if I said anything and encourage anybody, hey, I'm not that sharp. I'm not that smart. I'm just a regular guy just trying to share what I've been through. And again, just go to my website, ALANTBLACK.com, for more information on my books.
Excellent. And happy birthday in advance. Congratulations.
Thank you. Happy 68. How did I get this old?
How did that happen? Oh, I don't know.
I was so good looking when I was 25, and I'm like, where did it go?
Hey, it's just getting better. It's getting better and better. I love it.
I'm happy. I'm very much looking forward to the 29th.
Very good. Congratulations. Thank you for being part of the podcast. And again, we'll have you back for to talk music in the future. I'm looking forward to that.
Thank you. I'm really looking forward to that. That's my real passion. Thank you again, Mr. Kevin.
Awesome. Alan G. Black, you're on the podcast. Thank you, Alan.
Bye-bye.
Thanks for being part of the podcast again. Appreciate you investing time in the show and you for listening this far. Thank you. One thing to keep in mind is we are looking for help and some support for the podcast. If you are able to help support our show, our little podcast show here, we can go over to livingthenextchapter.com and all the instructions will be there to help support the show. It takes about $30 to $40 a month to do this, just for the hosting and all of that other stuff that we pay for. But if the show is giving you any value and you're enjoying what's happening here, would love any kind of support that you can offer. That would be great. And you being here and sharing the show helps us grow. Helps us get great new authors on the show, connect with other listeners, and build community. So whatever you can do to share this show today, I really appreciate it. Thank you for being here for Living the Next Chapter, and I can't wait to share the next one with you. Talk soon. Have a great day.
Mindshift Power Podcast, the podcast for teenagers and those who work with them. There's a huge problem in America today. There's a very large disconnect between teenagers and the adults who work with them. I'm looking to bridge that gap with real, raw, honest conversation, not held back by the chains of political correctness. You cannot solve a problem you do not understand. Want to understand teenagers today? Listen to this podcast. This podcast is for teens in the U.S. and Canada. To learn more, go to fatimabay.com/podcast or just look for Mindshift Power Podcast on any listening platform. I look forward to you being a faithful listener.